You're listening to Ricky and Jimmy on Relationships, the show where we uncover the thoughts and behaviors that are sabotaging your relationship and what you can do about it. Jimmy and I are passionate about sharing the ways that imperfect partners like you and I can shift unhealthy relational dynamics and create closeness. So welcome. Drop your defenses and open your heart, eyes, and ears. Let's learn how to be the best partner we can be together.
All right, welcome back. Today, I am so thrilled that we have the pleasure to talk to one of my favorite creators in the relationship space, Jillian Turecki. She is a certified relationship coach with over 20 years of experience, who I believe is an expert in helping us build great relationships with others while also building a great relationship with ourselves. So, Jillian, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Jillian, we are seriously thrilled. You are a big name in the relationship space, and you have been for a while. What brought you into this space? How did you get here?
How did I get here? Well, it's interesting. I taught yoga for many years, like 18 years in New York City. And so I have always, for over 20 years, I've been helping people heal their pain. And I worked obviously a lot with people with physical pain, and yoga is a great way to do that, but it's also emotional pain, because yoga is the practice of using our bodies to access more elevated states of consciousness and of being. And I loved teaching yoga. I love being a teacher. I really identify with being a teacher, and I love helping people reach better states within themselves. But I always felt like, where do I go with this? Like, I felt like the ceiling was quite low. And I wanted more, but I didn't know what it was. And around the time that I was getting restless about what I wanted to do, I met the man who would become my husband. He's now my ex-husband. And I also had this, I thought my path would be have babies, get married, like go the more traditional route. And it was a very difficult marriage, and it was very painful, and it ended very abruptly, and at the same time that I was going through a miscarriage, and my mom was dying of lung cancer. And so I went through a very intense dark night of the soul, and my whole world fell apart. And in my effort to claw my way out of what felt like an abyss of darkness and hell, I discovered certain teachers, I discovered coaching, and I became obsessed with understanding why my marriage didn't work, and why I was where I was in life and not able to have the relationship that I want. And so it was existential crisis, and I became totally obsessed. And then I started, I was listening to Tony Robbins every day, and that was getting me out of bed. And I thought, this is what really resonates. This is actually what's giving me a little spark of desire to live, And it was just through that work with relationships, I started to work on myself, and I thought, I had the same feeling that I had many years prior, which was, I just felt this undeniable pull to teach yoga, like this is what I had to do. And then I had this undeniable pull to coach families and couples and individuals. And I've been obsessed with it ever since. I've been obsessed with relationships for decades. And so I just sort of transitioned slowly from being a yoga teacher to teaching about relationships. And the rest is history.
Oh, I love it.
I love that.
I love it. I think I love it. Seems like all the creators who are just really here with their whole heart and obsession, like you said, we do kind of come to this from climbing out of a really dark place. You hear that story a lot, and honestly, those are my favorite creators to talk to, because we're here because we love this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's. Look, life can be very hard, and our resilience is determined by how well we can turn something difficult into something that gives our lives some sort of meaning. Mm-hmm. And it's I don't know, I didn't do it alone. I had a lot of help, and I've had a lot of mentors, and I've invested tens of thousands of dollars into myself, and into my career. So yeah, I think that's why. I think that's the thing about the human spirit that is just so unbelievable.
For listeners that don't know, Jillian has a podcast, Jillian on Love, and it is just an absolute gift to the world. If you're not listening to that, you really should. Right after this, go listen to that. I've listened to as many episodes as I could, not in preparation for this. I've just always been a big fan, and you have. I mean, I just love your style. Resonates so well, and I would hope it resonates with everybody, because it's just about personal accountability and how to have a great relationship with others, but also how difficult that is when we don't have a great relationship with ourselves. I think you say that multiple times, like you can't connect with others if you're disconnected with yourself. What are some things that just come to mind to help people reconnect with themselves in order to connect with somebody else?
Well, I mean, it's not like you have to like go to therapy for years or do anything like that to reconnect with yourself. I mean, you could. It depends on, how much you're struggling. It could be a walk. It could be taking a deep breath. It could be a shower. It could be a hug. It could be a hard workout. It could be giving back in some way. Like the path to finding ourselves or rediscovering ourselves again or reconnecting with ourselves is available. It's really at our fingertips all the time. We just have to be willing to incorporate practices in which we are not only able to be more aware of when we are disconnected, because that's the first step, is to be able to say, oh, like I'm in my head right now, like I'm not in a good place right now. Like, I just remember, like, because when I moved here, like the days of the move, I was like, there were just a lot of things going wrong, and I was like, wow, I'm like just not. And then I went out for dinner with family, and they were starting to like bring up some difficult things, and I just was like, I just want you all to know that I am emotionally fragile right now, and anything that you bring up right now, I'm going to overreact to. So can we just change the subject? But it was just like that level of, that was like a big win for me, because to have that kind of awareness of just like knowing when you are just not in this state to be able to do things and to express that to people. I mean, that's really, really important. And if more couples and more people did that in their romantic relationships, there would be so many relationships that lasted longer. Or just sort of like, I'm in my head right now, I'm so sorry, I'm coming back to you, I'm present. Or let me get back in my body because I've been so in my head. So it really is available. So the first step is just to notice when you're not connected to yourself. And then it's changing our bodies, breath, doing anything with our bodies is the fastest way to become embodied again. Just is.
That the grounding exercise where you pick 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear. Yes. Jimmy, you're familiar with that one?
I've heard of it. Yeah. Yeah,
that's my favorite way. Whenever I notice, especially when my partner's trying to talk to me and I'm just not there, I'm like, give me a minute, babe. So I'm gonna do some quick grounding and then I will be back with you. It's made a big difference for us, because the girl he was talking to who didn't have a tool like that, I was, distracted or overreacting, like you said. Mm-hmm. That's been big.
I think that's a Buddhist tool. It's great for anxiety, and it's great for any sort of, I don't know, dissociating, out of body, whatever. Like when we're stressed, we have basically an out of body experience. We get all trapped in here and we're not connected to here. And so I love that exercise a lot.
Do you feel like stress is one of the biggest like components of people just having dysfunctional relationships is their stress?
Yes, it's how they're reacting to their stress. and not having the tools to come back into a more mindful state. And look, there's also the much deeper stress of, you know, you take the person who society and their parents have told them, and you know, this is not to blame parents, it's just the ethos of what you learn as a child is you have to achieve at a certain level, right? Not every child is taught that. But let's say you take a child that where high achievement was expected, it was like part of the family culture, which is actually in many ways can be really good, you know, really good. And then you throw in society that tells you you have to achieve at a certain level, and if you don't, then you're a loser. And so if you walk around with that belief system and that understanding of it's literally, I don't have value unless I'm achieving at a high level. I mean, this is why, you know, the great crash of 2008, this is why, you know, men, it was mostly men because men have been programmed more than women. This is changing, but men have been programmed more by women, more by society, more than women, to achieve at a high level. And so why were these men committing suicide? Because their whole identity was wrapped up in their money making. And so we're all walking around in some way, our identities are wrapped up in certain things. And when our life conditions are not matching what we believe we should be doing in life, right? If our life conditions are putting up a mirror and saying, you are not, what you're seeing in your reflection is not how you're supposed to be, that is the deepest stress imaginable. And we're not so aware of it, right? Like I could be very aware of the stress of moving because that's like an acute stress. This is more of like a systemic, you know, get under your skin viral stress that these are the things that destroy relationships, because when we're in that, we get totally obsessed with ourselves, totally self-consumed. We are the protagonist of our story in a way that's not helping us at all. And then we start to become emotionally unavailable to the person who we're in a relationship with. We become closed, we become unreachable. And this is the thing that destroys many relationships that people don't really talk about.
I'm always so sad. Oh, sorry, Jimmy.
No, go ahead.
I'm always so sad when I hear people will come to me with the message that it's just like, if somebody doesn't love me, I don't feel like I'm worth anything. That's like a very common message that I get. And I hear what you're saying with that undercurrent that we've been fed in our society. It's like, if you need to have a certain amount of achievements, you need to have a certain amount of wealth, you need to have somebody who holds you up on a pedestal. Those are the things that make you lovable and worthy. And I just, your Instagram page, which I've been following for years, I love that the overarching message there is really like we can give a lot of love to ourselves without any of those things. And people really do need to hear more of that, because the world's not telling them that for sure.
That's definitely for sure. Definitely for sure.
You just did an episode, I think it just came out a couple days ago on your podcast about you know, finding the one. I'm using quotation marks.
Yeah, it just came out 2 days ago. The myth of the one.
Yes, the myth of the one, obviously. Yeah. I saw a quote. This isn't from this episode, but it still pertains. You said in one of the past episodes, even with the right person, you'll still have to face your demons. And this is so true. And that's what's so dangerous about the myth of the one, is we think that, well, once I find someone, or once I find that person, then everything's going to be fine. And it's so sad when we don't, and easy. And I was absolutely, I felt like, I mean, I just never really considered how my own destructive coping mechanisms and my own baggage was going to affect my relationship. I mean, I feel like people can fall into that trap very, very easily by thinking that our relationships are successful based on who we choose, which, don't get me wrong, who we choose is a huge component, but we're still going to have to face our demons.
Absolutely. It's, I mean, look, who we choose is more than half the battle, but then who we are in the relationship is the other half.
Yeah.
That's great.
So they're both really important. And yeah, it's true. Look, I mean, the thing is, when in the honeymoon stage, which is, I consider just the stage of a relationship when we are falling in love, right? Is we just experience such an extreme heightened state of bliss during that time. And it's really beautiful. But when we're in that state, life, we see the world, we see the glass half full, when maybe we usually saw it half empty. We see the sun on a cloudy day. We see the solution to the problem that's been plaguing us. But it's not, and meeting that other person was maybe the catalyst, but it only awakens something that we are actually capable of accessing ourselves. And we have to, because the falling in love stage doesn't last. It doesn't last. Something else replaces it. And something else that could be far more meaningful. So, but we're not, we've been fed and we romanticize the falling in love stage. That's that's what we want to watch in movies. That's what we want to read in novels. You want to read that because art in its various forms it's meant to evoke emotion from us. And so the more emotion, the more we're like swept away. Yeah. And then it's the rude awakening of just like, oh, you?
Yeah.
Like, you're great, but,
that's a really tough fall. Right. That's a really tough fall for a lot of people when that 6 months to 18 months infatuation stage ends and they're left looking at this person and you're like, wow, you do have flaws. Maybe I made a wrong choice. And that makes me so sad because they're looking back at you thinking the same thing, Well,
what I was saying, we become fallen heroes. All of us.
Oh, yeah.
We become the fallen hero, It's like, it takes an incredible amount of maturity and also, I think what's incredibly underrated is, look, here's the truth. You can't really build attraction for someone who you meet and you're like, nope, like, no way, like, not attracted to you, like, at all.
Yeah.
Or turned off. That could be difficult, but you can feel spiritually or intellectually attracted to someone and spend time with them, and it's not a guarantee, but it can grow into physical attraction. And I think that's very underrated, and it happens a lot for people.
Yeah.
You actually talk a lot about that in different episodes, and that is one of the most fascinating parts about this whole relationship sphere is just because is that you can actually be attracted to the wrong type of person. And like, how wild is that to think about that we can get so swept up in our own stuff that stable and healthy and is actually unattractive to us.
Yes.
And like, how dangerous is that? Like, how much of a,
Or we could have the most perfect person, or as close to perfect of a person for us, standing before us, but because they don't look the part of who we always imagined ourselves to be with, we could be like, they're not blonde, or they're not brunette, or they're a little short. Like, that's tragic.
Yeah, 100%.
I have another or, if you'd like.
Yes.
Or we can be attracted to somebody who's kind of terrible for us because they have opposing issues that rub us all the wrong way. And it's an incredible opportunity for two people who are willing to work on that to heal some big stuff. That was my story with my partner. We were absolutely probably should have stayed far away from each other, but we're very attracted. But thank goodness, both open to saying, wow, we really trigger every single thing in each other that's problematic, but we're willing to work on that together.
And wait, that's amazing. So did you do that like with couples counseling or individual counseling?
No couples counseling. No, I did a lot of individual counseling myself. I think we really lucked out in that all I do is read about this stuff all day long. And so I was able to bring a lot of tools into our conversations that he wasn't aware of. Also, I got to give my partner credit in that he's just incredibly open to self-work. He's just someone I met who I noticed he was always like, what can I do to improve myself and my brain and how things are going with other people? So I saw that in him and I was like, I can work with that.
Okay, that's amazing. So so now as it stands for the two of you, you're in a good place?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we both test secure on the attachment tests now. And in the beginning, it was absolutely not like that. So sometimes
that you should write a book about for sure.
I am, and it's taking forever, but
it's amazing.
Yeah, it is possible. Mm-hmm.
It is possible to turn an unhealthy, but most people don't because they're just too stubborn, too ego-driven, too immature,
or too triggered to be able to wade through that pain. It was painful. It wasn't 100%. Easy,
It's just, wow. It's amazing. Bravo.
It seems like if you have two people who are actually willing to do the work, I mean, you can do anything. I mean, you can do a lot. Incredible.
Yeah, even if it ends up ending, like even if it doesn't end up working out, two people who are willing to do that. Yeah, it can be quite amazing.
Yeah, I like that you said that, Jimmy. If my relationship with my partner ended right now today, he and I are such better people for having met each other and worked through a lot of this stuff. We'll be bringing tools into a future relationship that we didn't have before. So that's great.
Beautiful.
And speaking of relationships ending, you talk a lot about, even though it's a tough subject, but like, not that we could spend too much time on when to end a relationship because that's a whole episode itself.
Big one.
But you talk about when you're thinking about ending a relationship, or that you should at least answer some core questions of like, do I actually know this person? Do I actually know how they feel loved? Do I actually know how they feel valued? Am I putting myself out there? It doesn't mean that you should be putting yourself out there to be taken advantage of, but like, am I actually fully 100% in this relationship? You can still do that with setting healthy boundaries, but like, am I actually all in, or am I like guarded and, I'm not really finding out about who they are truly?
Yeah. I think, when we are unhappy in a relationship, we go into survival mode.
Absolutely.
And when we go into survival mode, we become obsessed with our survival. And in that, we can become very critical, we can blame, we can, make the other person the problem. Now, certainly if someone was in any sort of abusive situation, I just want them to get out. I don't want them to work on the relationship.
Totally.
At all. But I think that if you love someone and you have a lot of skin in the game, or enough skin in the game, and you really want to make it work, like, it really is about evaluating yourself as a partner as much as evaluating them. And I think that one of the pervasive problems when it comes to relationships that is very difficult for people to hear is selfishness. Because there's one class of selfishness, which is just like the complete narcissist, or even someone who's not a narcissist, but really just kind of sucks, honestly. Sucks, and I wouldn't recommend anyone dating them. Like, they got to go fix themselves if they ever really want to be in a relationship, like really selfish people. And then there's the rest of people, which is more people than not, who are actually loving and generous and good people, but can be very selfish in their relationships because they just are so protective of their own hearts. So all they're thinking about is themselves, and not really understand and how their needs are not being met, and not really thinking about their impact, how they're showing up. And so overcoming our own personal narcissism and our own selfishness is a big part of relationship.
I feel like when we're at a place where we have either a subconscious fear, we're either too selfish or too selfless, right? I mean, it can go either way.
But sometimes the really selfless person is strangely manipulative because they're trying to give to get, you know. But then there's also the person who's not necessarily manipulative, but really doesn't have the boundaries of understanding that, you know, you want to be a giver, but there's certain people have to learn how not to be taken advantage of. Like that's their work.
Yeah.
Is to learn that.
I'm really glad you said that. I get messages quite often from people who say, but I just love to give. I just love to give. That's who I am. And I can't tell them enough that giving without healthy boundaries is like, it's going to hurt you more than it's going to help anybody else, you know?
Or give to the right person. Give to the person who appreciates it.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Give to the person who appreciates it, not for the person who doesn't care about it.
Mm-hmm. And you talk a lot about that. Did you struggle with the people pleasing and the poor boundaries when you were younger?
You know, I mean, I think that I don't know anyone who's never struggled a little bit with people pleasing. I think that I definitely struggled with some low self-worth, and I definitely struggled with, I think that this is also something that women are given the message, which is like, the way you get, let's just say the man in this case, the way you get the man is by just giving and giving and giving and giving. And it's like, no, actually, that's not. You want to be generous in giving, but I think we're all attracted to people who know how to give to themselves. And I think that that's really important. But yeah, I've had some really lovely relationships, but I definitely have had relationships with those who lean more towards selfish, and that was something that I had to take a look at.
I love the way you put that. That's so compassionate. Like the relationships with people who lean a little selfish. That's very kind of you. That's not everybody would put it that kind. You know, it sounds like you've had a lot of time to put a lot of empathy toward those people, you know?
Well, I think I just don't feel emotionally connected to the experience anymore. I'm not hurt by it anymore. So I think that helps for me to talk about it more objectively.
Speaking of what you just brought up, Ricky, I feel like you are one of the, I'm sure there's a lot of people, but you and a couple others, I feel like, are very good at showing compassion to the avoidant, side of the spectrum where a lot of people kind of demonize them, and I understand why, but it's not helpful, and it's not always correct, in their thinking. So that's one thing that I've got a lot out of your stuff is just like radical accountability, but also self-compassion, and pair that with boundaries, and you can build a great relationship.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about the avoidant attachment style is like there's such a large spectrum when we're talking about this, and there's a very big difference between the person who literally shuts down at anything, like literally, like whenever there's conflict, they just shut down and they're unreachable. And they may even disappear for a few days. Like that's highly dysfunctional. Let's just call it what it is. It's highly dysfunctional. That's different than, and I see this a lot with women, like they want to talk about the relationship all the time, and then their partner's feeling like overwhelmed and kind of like shutting down the conversation because they don't want to be constantly talking about the relationship. So some of their avoidance comes up, and then all of a sudden you're like, you're avoidant. That's a very different thing. Right. Like we can, if we're too aggressive in our relationships, we can make someone very avoidant. And if we are too, and if we're too aloof, we can make someone extremely anxious. Like I think that like we all have our attachment styles, but it's how we relate to each other. We're either making each other more anxious, or making each other more avoidant, or making each other more secure in many ways.
Yep. Yeah. I it's not a popular message that I put out on my page, but it's one that needs to be said a lot, that everybody's out here looking for the perfect secure partner, but if we are not correcting the way that we're showing up, if we are somebody who's bringing up our insecurities or needing reassurance every 5 minutes in a relationship, we'll make a secure person act avoidantly, whether they want to or not.
For sure. For sure. And it gets very, very, very complicated. I think at the end of the day, it's like, it really just boils down to what am I doing to contribute to whatever's not working right now?
Yes. Right. Yep. Things change when we take accountability for the way that we're really affecting our partner.
They really do.
One of the things that you touch on a lot that I wasn't aware of is the stories and the meaning that I'm giving, especially during conflict of what's happening. And that changes a lot when both people can actually vulnerably and respectfully bring that up. Like, this is the meaning that I'm giving this, that changes the whole game. And it doesn't mean that the other person has to go, well, that's not what I meant. Like, when they can actually meet that and say, like, oh, I can understand how you would get there, or that makes sense to me.
Based on your interpretation.
Based on your interpretation, that's all. It's just about, like, I value your perspective and I can understand how you got to that meaning. But that's so important to know the stories that we're telling ourselves, the narrative that we're doing.
It's huge. I mean, I think, we want to be able to, trust, respect, safety. These are the foundation of a relationship. And things get very complicated when the foundation is ruptured in some way, because we really want to be able to, when we're triggered or angry at our partner, to be able to say to ourselves, can I trust that this person in their heart of hearts meant well? Or can I trust that this person in their heart of hearts really truly does not want to hurt me or trigger me? Because if you can say that to yourself, that's what's really important, because in the heat of the moment, we're going to see a monster in front of us. We're going to see mom who didn't love us enough, daddy who abandoned us, our ex us over. Like, projection is a very real thing. And I always say that people don't fight with each other, they fight with the worst stories that they've created about each other.
I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot. I think I would be doing my followers a disservice if I didn't ask you, what do you think is the best piece of advice that you would give to somebody who is very, very deeply in love, but with somebody who is not putting in enough effort for it to feel good for the question asker?
Well, the first thing would be to have a conversation with that person. It's, you have to communicate. And I think that, God, it's like, I think stage of relationship matters. It's like, if someone is like within the first month or 3 months of dating someone, my advice to them is going to be very different than if they're referring to their long-term partner, right? Like, I don't really think, like, if I know, like, there are beautiful stories like your story with your partner, but a lot of times it's like, if things are just like tumultuous and you've known the person 3 months, I'm like, get out of it. Or you've known them, or you've been with them for 3 months and you're realizing, oh, they're addicted to this, they're addicted to that, they don't do this, they don't do that, but we have such a strong connection. I'm like, tell them to beat it. Like, get out of it. Like, life is short and who you choose matters. And you're not that connected to them. Trust me, it's only been 3 months.
Totally.
But, different advice. But either way, it starts with a conversation. So even if you're dating someone and you're feeling like maybe they're not as into me as they're not investing in me at the level that I'm investing in them. I mean, if it's really early dating, I would just move on. If it's like you're actually dating, you have a conversation, just saying, like, this is how I feel about you. You lead with vulnerability. This is how I feel about you. I'm getting the sense you don't feel the same. Like to talk about it with you. And if you're in a relationship, it's like, look, I'm feeling, you really lead with love and vulnerability. Like, I'm scared. I feel like you don't love me anymore. I feel like I don't matter to you as much. I feel like you're distracted, and I want to be more connected to you.
And their answer really does tell you a lot, It was early on when I started saying those kind of things to my partner. And instead of hearing, you're crazy, or I don't want to hear about that. He didn't say anything like that. He was like, your feelings matter to me. And he's like, I'm screwing up a lot, but I would like to work together to figure out why we're having these arguments over and over again. And I was like, this is great. This might be early on, but that's the kind of attitude that can really see a couple through some tough times.
Well, yeah, and that would be a reason to give it a chance, rather than someone dismissing you.
You say one of your great quotes is, "Your relationship is a gift, not a given," and that it resonates so well with just like going back to reciprocal relationships, where we should both make sure that we're not taking advantage of the other person. Now, obviously, that's kind of hard to do when you don't have a framework of like, well, what does that mean? Like, how do I know if I'm not giving enough? But really, just step one is, well, at least when that person vulnerably and respectfully tells you how they feel, to like be open, to be curious about like what's going on, and making sure that we're not immediately getting defensive or invalidating them. But
there's an old saying, happy wife, happy life. Right. And we can just apply that across the board. Happy partner, happy life, happy,
Right.
So it's like, if your partner is unhappy with something, it behooves you to listen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Stan Tatkin, who we recently had on, said something very
wonderful.
Similar. Yeah, he's wonderful. It was very similar. It's like, it's in your best interest to pay attention when your partner says that something bothers them or something's wrong,
100%.
Yeah.
Your life is just going to be miserable if you don't pay attention.
Absolutely.
You talked about how, I don't mean to get too personal, but I just listened to one of your episodes. You talked about how you grew up with kind of a, not you personally, but in an environment of like a glass half full environment. And glass half empty environment. And in other episodes, you talk about how important it is for us to just not be complaining, negativity, like how much that's destructive to the overall health of a relationship. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, personally speaking, like I was raised by immigrants, and so I think that part of that mentality is sort of looking at life very realistically, but it can teeter on the negative. And I also grew up with a father with mental illness, and my mom didn't have mental illness, but I think that she struggled with a lot of situational depression just because of just life, right? And being married to my father, who was very difficult. So I just was surrounded by, I really admire and envy those who were just raised in families of just so much positivity. And I think that, and this is important, I think, for anyone who's listening who are parents, those people really have better lives and they have better relationships. But that doesn't mean that we can't learn. It just means we have to train ourselves. And, there's a whole movement of a whole thing on positive psychology. That's a real thing. And it's not about toxic positivity. It's about really training ourselves, our brains, to be able to see the silver lining and to be able to see the sun through the clouds, not in a way that's delusional, but in a way that it's about breaking the habit of seeing things worse than they are, because the realist likes to say that they see things as they are, but a lot of realists will also see things worse than they are. And I think that it's important to see things as they are, and also to be able to imagine them better than they are. And that's important. And so complaining, we're responsible for the energy that we bring to our relationship. Now, we're going to have hard days, and I believe that if we're with someone who's worth being with, we should be able to unravel in front of them. We should be able to have a little nervous breakdown in front of them and still totally be loved and supported. We're human beings. But on the day-to-day, the status quo, like if we're constantly bringing home our leftovers, and we're giving everyone else like our good energy, or even if we're just like just Scrooge with just everything. Like that is not, no one wants to be around that. And I think that it's a bad habit. And I think that it's one that people need to take seriously.
And then the negativity bias is a real thing. And it's something that in our cave days kept us safe. But it's not, like you said, it's not much fun to be around. Just because your partner's one bad behavior is the thing that you can't stop thinking about doesn't mean that they didn't do 6 other things that were wonderful that you should really consider, that don't feel like they have as much weight, but they do. And you're right, positive psychology would say taking note of those and really soaking those things in is the way to get over that over-focus on the 1 out of 6. That's not good.
A lot of women do it. Women do it more than men. They just do. I think it's because we just are so driven to feel safe and in relationships. But, that hypervigilance could also be like, some trauma. It's a whole conglomerate of things. And yes, training ourselves to be able to see what we can appreciate and what they are doing right is so important.
I want to ask a silly question. I don't know, we can end on this, or Ricky. This will be my last question. Ricky can ask another. But I know you're constantly learning about this. You're passionate, as are we. Do you feel like the more that you learn, relationships as a whole become more complex or more simple?
That's not a silly question. That's a great question. I think that when I am starting to think that they're becoming more complicated is when I am listening to too many people on social media and their opinions and therapists. And actually it's more simple. I don't think it's easy to execute, but I do think therapists are, I just have to call it how I see it. I do think therapists tend to make things more complicated sometimes and tend to, I'm not saying that certain things can definitely be complicated, but the solution to these problems are rooted in very, very ancient, simple things that are not easy.
Right.
Yeah. Well said. I like that. My only question to close things off would be, what is your favorite way for people to find you and engage with you online?
Oh, thank you. So certainly my Instagram at Jillian Turecki, and for women, I have a membership called The Conscious Woman, and I'm very actively engaged with those members. And then my podcast, Jillian on Love. Yeah, those are the best ways, I would say, for sure.
Awesome.
Oh, and now I just released a Substack, so I have a new newsletter that you can. Yes,
Ooh,
so that's
nice.
I have a new newsletter. It's called Love Weekly, and you can join it either for free or there's a paid option if you just want extra stuff. So a lot going on.
Very similar to Patreon, right?
Yeah, it is. So I have a subscription also for the podcast. This is like just like it's basically a newsletter. It's like you get a blog, but then if you do a paid option, you get it every week versus once a month. So
Oh, okay, cool. Very cool.
But I interact with people. They submit questions and I answer questions. So yeah.
Oh, fun. I love it.
That's awesome.
Okay, cool. Jillian,
thank you so much again for doing this.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Jimmy and I have been watching you from afar for a long time and just loving everything that you put out. So,
I love your content. So thank you. I appreciate that.